At 6:15 a.m. on a biting November morning, 3 members of the Highland Crest Architectural Committee stood on their manicured sidewalk, staring through a line of frozen pine trees at a structure they had spent a decade trying to erase. The building was a sprawling, low-slung warehouse made of heavy timber and corrugated steel. It sat on the very edge of their gated paradise, a relic of an era before the neighborhood existed. To the residents of Highland Crest, it was a ghost, a rotting eyesore that lowered their property values and ruined their view of the valley. For years, it had been silent, windows shattered, paint peeling, the gravel lot swallowed by tall grass and rust. They confidently assumed it was only a matter of time before the county condemned it and they could expand their tennis courts over its grave. Or so they thought. Then, the gates moved. The heavy iron rollers, which hadn't shifted in years, shrieked open. A low, rhythmic thrumming began to vibrate through the earth, the sound of a heavy-duty industrial generator waking up. Then came the convoy, 3 flatbed trailers carrying massive, climate-controlled shipping containers, a crane truck, and a team of technicians in high-visibility gear. By 7 a.m., a new sign was bolted to the gate. Blackwood Station, Data and Infrastructure. By the time the HOA president, a woman named Lydia, arrived in her luxury SUV, the hum of high-powered cooling fans was already drifting across the property line. She stepped out with her signature violation folder tucked under her arm, ready to shut down what she assumed was an illegal junkyard. But she stopped cold when she saw the federal infrastructure placards pinned to the fence and a licensed security team blocking the service road. That was the moment they realized I hadn't bought a pile of scrap. I had bought a heartbeat. I had bought the one thing their neighborhood standards could never touch. If you were standing there with me, watching the realization sink into Lydia's face, what would you have said? Drop it in the comments. Tell me what state you're watching from. And welcome to Behind HOA Stories. My name is Cole, and I didn't buy Blackwood Station by accident.
I spent 20 years as a network infrastructure architect. I was the guy companies called when their servers melted down, or when they needed to build high-security data hubs in places no one else could reach. I spent 2 decades making other people's digital empires invincible, while I lived in a house where the HOA fined me $50 if my trash can was visible for 10 minutes after the truck left. I didn't want another promotion. I wanted autonomy. Blackwood Station sat on a jagged 12-acre parcel that the Highland Crest development had been built around in the early 2000s. The developers had tried to buy the land back then, but the owner, an eccentric old radio engineer, refused to sell. When he passed away, the building sat in probate for 9 years. Most people saw a crumbling warehouse. I saw a reinforced concrete floor capable of holding thousands of pounds of server racks. I saw an old industrial power feed that bypassed the residential grid entirely. And most importantly, I saw the deed. The HOA crowd called it an abandoned headache. They assumed that because it was ugly, it had no rights. But I had spent 6 months in the county archives before I even made an offer. I found that Blackwood Station wasn't just a warehouse. It was registered as a critical communication node under a 1950 civil defense charter that had never been revoked.
I signed the closing papers on a Friday. On Monday, the HOA made their first move. They didn't come with a welcome to the neighborhood basket. They came with a notice of intent to sue. Lydia, the president, was a woman who used the safety of the children as a weapon to control everything from the color of curtains to the breed of dogs allowed in the zip code. She was flanked by 2 board members who looked like they were auditioning for a role in a corporate thriller. I met them at the gate. I was wearing grease-stained jeans and holding a tablet. "Mr. Blackwood," Lydia started, her voice as sharp as a razor. "We've seen the trucks. We've heard the noise. I'm sure you're aware that this subdivision is zoned strictly R1 for residential use. Whatever industrial fantasy you have planned ends today." I looked at the folder she was holding. "It's actually a data redundancy center, Lydia. And I'm not in your subdivision." "You are surrounded by it," she snapped. "Your access road crosses our private property. Your building violates our visual harmony clause. We will have an injunction on your desk by noon." I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I simply told her that I was working within the law and that I suggested she read the 1954 easement agreement filed with the county. She gave me a smile that was more of a bared teeth snarl and walked away.
Over the next month, they tried everything. They sent noise pollution citations every time a truck arrived. They called the EPA, claiming I was leaking server chemicals into the groundwater. They even tried to lobby the utility company to cut my power, claiming the industrial draw was a fire hazard to the nearby homes. I didn't react emotionally. I ran this like a project. Every letter they sent went into a binder. Every time Lydia parked her car at the gate to take photos of my technicians, I saved the 4K security footage. Every time a board member accidentally wandered onto my property to look for a lost dog, I logged the trespass. The turning point came when they blocked the service road. They had a landscaping crew dump 6 tons of decorative boulders right across the entrance, claiming the road was HOA property and they were landscaping for safety. My fiber optic crew was supposed to arrive in 2 hours. A delay would cost me $20,000. I didn't call Lydia. I called the county sheriff and the Department of Emergency Management. When the sheriff arrived, Lydia was standing by the boulders, looking triumphant. "It's our road," she told the officer. "We have the right to landscape it." I stepped forward and handed the sheriff a map from the 1954 Civil Defense Charter. "Actually, Sheriff, this road is a designated emergency access route. Blocking it isn't a neighborhood dispute, it's a felony interference with critical infrastructure." The sheriff looked at the map, then at Lydia. His expression went from neutral to very, very serious. "Ma'am," he said, "you have 30 minutes to get a tractor here and move these rocks, or I'm calling a heavy-duty tow truck and sending the bill and the arrest warrant to your HOA board." Lydia's face went white. The boulders were moved in 20 minutes. 2 weeks later, the HOA called an emergency town hall. They wanted to vote on a special assessment to hire a high-priced law firm to remove the Blackwood nuisance. They had stirred up the neighborhood into a frenzy, telling people that my data center would cause radiation, lower their home values, and attract cyber criminals. I showed up to the meeting. Lydia tried to bar me from entering. "This is for members only," she said. "Actually," I said, holding up a small piece of paper, "I bought a 0.5% interest in one of the vacant lots in your subdivision yesterday. I'm a member now, and I'd like to speak." The room was silent as I walked to the front. I didn't use a microphone. I just projected. "I know what Lydia has told you," I said to the crowd of 200 neighbors. "She's told you I'm a threat. But here's what she didn't tell you. My property, Blackwood Station, holds the primary utility easement for this entire hill. That means the water pipes, the fiber optic lines, and the backup power conduits that serve your homes all run through my basement." I paused to let that sink in. For the last 9 years, the previous owner didn't charge the HOA for the maintenance of those lines. But my deed allows me to charge an infrastructure access fee to any neighboring entity using my private conduits. Up until now, I was going to waive that fee. But since the board has decided to spend $50,000 of your dues to sue me, I've decided to start billing. I handed a document to the board's treasurer. "That's a bill for the last 3 months of utility transit. It's $15,000. It's due in 10 days. If it's not paid, I'll be forced to repair the conduits, which might lead to some prolonged internet and water outages for Highland Crest." Lydia screamed that it was blackmail. The neighbors, however, looked at the bill, then at her, and realized that her personal vendetta was about to cost them thousands of dollars each. The vote to sue failed 198 to 2. Today, Blackwood Station is the most profitable data redundancy site in the region. The windows are no longer broken. They are replaced with ballistic-grade, darkened glass. The weeds are gone, replaced by a clean, high-security perimeter. The eyesore is now a fortress of blue LED lights and humming precision. And the HOA? They are the quietest neighbors I've ever had. Lydia resigned 3 months after that meeting. The new board sent me a fruit basket last Christmas. They finally realized that property lines are just lines on a map, but infrastructure is power. Every morning, when I look through the fence and see the residents of Highland Crest walking their dogs past my gates, I smile. They wanted a neighborhood where everything was perfect and under their thumb. Instead, they got a reminder that the world is bigger than their bylaws. I didn't buy that warehouse to start a fight. I bought it because I knew the value of what was underneath it. The fact that it drives them crazy is just the interest on my investment. Because at the end of the day, you can regulate the height of a fence, but you can't regulate a man who owns the ground your internet runs through. I was never the one trapped by the neighborhood. They were the ones trapped by their own arrogance. And now, they get to hear the hum of my success every single day.